schools. The two biggest districts with about 12,000 students, I have several students who are superintendents of 12,000 student school districts, and they know and talk to their principals all the time and know what's going on. So I would assume that that's a fair transfer to how Wyoming superintendents work on those school sizes as well. Oh, sorry. Oh, we wanted to share? Okay.
Oh.
Sharing is not turned on. We need to turn sharing on.
And Dr. Pikus, we're live now, so.
Oh, okay, yes.
For camera.
I'm just, Mr. Co-Chair, I'm just waiting for them to enable me to share my screen, and then I will do so. I'll keep talking for another minute, and then we'll try again. That was at-risk pupil support. I don't know if there's any questions about that. It's really up to provide additional staff people to support students. Okay. The next one are extended day and summer school. And they essentially work identically in terms of the amount of funding that they generate. The concept behind extended day is many children need additional learning time and want to make available time at the school possible for those children. But we think that at least half of that time should be in academic pursuits, not just being at school. And so the model assumes that an extended day program operates for 2 hours, 5 days a week. And then to estimate the costs, this is again an adequacy model. This is not a model to just make it available so y'all come, but that's an option a district could clearly choose to do if it wanted to, although it would potentially cost more. But we use half of the at-risk count, because we assume half of those students will participate. And then the rough way to think about this, and then we staff the class. The way the model eventually works out is it's one teacher for every 120 at-risk students. And as we assume half of them will take part, they'll be there for 2 hours, and that's about a quarter time of a teacher's time for those 2 hours. And I'm happy to work through the math with you all if you would like. I'm not sure it's a good time to do that. And then we also now add the $65 per at-risk student again, and that works to provide the extended day program. In summer school, we again believe they should be a academically strong program. You know, some summer school programs are only two or 3 weeks long. We think it probably needs to be a minimum of 6 weeks and 4 or 5 hours a day minimum time, so there's good opportunity to have academics. It's the same basis. It's going to be one teacher for every 120 at-risk students. There are fewer hours that a teacher teaches in summer school than a teacher would be available all year long for extended day. But in summer school, the teacher is also required to have a lesson plan every day and to grade papers, which the extended day program teachers would not. They would be there to effectively serve as tutors for the work the students already bring with them. It's kind of impossible to estimate exactly how many hours that would be. Each teacher does a different job, thinks about it in different ways, and has different things in the summer. After talking with teachers, after looking at what they do, it basically felt like it's sort of a commitment of roughly the same number of hours for a teacher. So that's how we came to generally the same cost. And again, the arithmetic's the same, so we can do it twice at some point. Am I okay to try getting this up on the screen again? Okay. Oh, look at that, there it is. Now I just have to find the right one. There we got there. And now I just want to put this in presentation mode and we're ready to roll, right? Yep, we're not. Okay. I will, okay, I'll try again. I've done this too many times. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, so we're going to pick that screen. We're going to pick share.
There we go.
There we go. All right. I think there's this, you have to hit a second button that says share, and I thought I had this time because I missed every time yesterday. And apparently I'm still, you know, we only teach with Zoom for the last 5 years, so that I can't do this is beyond me, but apparently I can't. Anyway, that is summer school and extended day. English language learners, we again, it's for each English language learner, and this would be individuals who are identified only as English language learners. There are very few of them in the state, comparatively, and they're spread across a number of the districts. But it's one for every 100 ELL students. So on virtually every district, it generates only a fraction of an additional staff position. So they would have to obviously work with the other counselors and tutors that the school generates in terms of the total number of positions. The one place where this model has been consistently criticized, and I believe here in Wyoming as well, is what happens when there is a sudden influx of a number of English learning students, because a whole community suddenly moves into a town, and they're from another country, and most people don't speak English. The challenges with that, obviously, the resources I provided here don't make a lot of sense. On the other hand, those challenges are somewhat temporary, and what we've typically recommended is something called a welcome center, and that just be funded separately for the time that's needed. And how long you can predict that's needed is just a question of how long the influx of families moving in continues, and then how long it takes to help children get up to speed to where they can take advantage from more traditional English language programs. So we have not put that in the model, but it is something that I don't know if there are any districts in Wyoming right now that have a situation where there's a large influx or not. It sometimes just happens. They're part of the community, and that seems like the best way to do it. The Welcome Center also would be expected to work with other social service agencies in the county and the city and the state to provide whatever other kinds of aids are made available to recent immigrants to make them, help them become successful in their new homes. So that works out. And really, I think that the difference, the $200,000 is really the materials costs. Nothing really changes in the cost of providing services for English language learners.
Dr. Pikus, English language learners are in the at-risk student count, and now in this subcategory we have them again. Are they being double counted here? Help me understand this.
Mr. Co-Chair, they're not being double counted is our intent. And so the way we do it is we count all the children who are free and reduced price lunch eligible, including children who are English language learners. And that comes up to whatever the number is. Then we would count, and I think this is how the state does it, any children who are categorized as English language learners but are not in the low income pool, and add them to it. So it's effectively an unduplicated count. A child only counts once. And I think even if they move from one school to another or one school district to another, they're still only counted once. And they generate the resources that then the district uses between the tutor and the pupil support, and then if there's some resources for English language support, those are used as well. Now, in most schools, you're not going to generate a whole teacher for English language support, particularly if it's an unduplicated count. And I don't know all the strategies that are used in Wyoming, because each district is different, each school is different, but it may be the kind of thing where if there's a few students that a district hopefully can employ a teacher who's trained in English language teaching and methods, and can the resources you generate pay for a portion of that individual's salary, and they spend 1 or 2 periods or hours a day in the pursuit of doing those as well. And that's always the challenges in very small districts, is A, identifying people, and B, sharing the workload that's there. And so that's how we would envision that it happens. And that's when I occasionally have a student who works in a small school district in my state, that's what they try to do as well. On the other hand, when they're in a big district in Los Angeles County, there's lots of English language learning students, and so it looks very different.
Dr. Pikus, what's the definition of an English language learner? The low income, that's pretty easy to define, but English language learner, just because they come from a family that's moved in? Mr. Griffith.
Mr. Co-Chair, I'm going to turn this over to Mike again.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Every state uses the same definition. It's the federal definition. which is an exam that is given, and then if students score below a certain score on it, then they are defined as English language learners. They're given the test usually every year in most cases, and then once their score hits above a certain mark, they're no longer considered. The federal rules allow for one extra year, so that's a transition year once you score above. And so just to kind of touch on it too, because I just wrote a paper on this, 37 states provide both at-risk and ELL funding. They combine the two, because when you look at the statistics, there are three really distinct groups of students. One are students who are just at risk. Another is a group of students who are just English language learners. And then students who are both tend to have the lowest scores and the lowest graduation rates by far of just students who are either just one of those two categories. So the research is really showing you need to fund both at risk and EL, because it's different supports and needs that are there. Now, how much each state funds is very different. Ranges from about $300 extra up to Maryland has an extremely generous system that's $8,600 extra for students, but most are in between there somewhere.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
any questions?
I would just add
Yes.
one comment
Matt.
to Mr. Griffiths. He's correct. Once they score above the assessment score for English language learners, in Wyoming, we add there's 2 years of monitoring after they are above that metric. And so for Wyoming's count, they're included if they score below that amount on the assessment, and then also in a year 1 and a year 2 monitoring status. So in some cases, I think you indicated 1 year. For Wyoming, we extend that up to 2 years.
Mr. Wilmoth, is that typical of other states to do that monitoring?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I believe Mr. Griffith indicated in the federal definition, they have a 1-year monitoring year, and Wyoming's extended it to 2 years.
Okay.
And that's defined by Department of Education rules.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wilmoth. Mr. Griffith.
Mr. Co-Chair, there are some states that actually cap the number of years children can receive English language services regardless of how they score on the test. And it affects a huge number of English learners, because the biggest state that does it is California. But I don't know about other states, but I think there's a couple of others. Colorado may do it as well. And I wouldn't be surprised Texas does it as well. I just have a feeling that I've read that somewhere. But that's large.
Cap it at how many years?
I'm sorry?
And they cap that at
2 years.
2 years, okay.
So it's 2 years of English language services, and then there are ways to get an exception for students who need additional critical help, but the goal in school districts is to move those children out after 2 years. And the Wyoming model is, after they pass the test, there's one, or in some cases, obviously, 2 years of additional monitoring to ensure that they've been successful.
Yes.
What is, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what does the monitoring mean? I mean, what is in dollars? I mean, is there dollars attached to monitoring? I mean, what does that even mean?
I would assume, and I don't know. I don't know if this is Matthew shook his head, and he didn't have an answer either. So we may get some answers from the people who are doing it. But I assume each district would determine how it wants to monitor it. And I don't know that there's funding available. It's certainly not here through the model unless you use the ELL funds to do that monitoring in some way. But it would be, I assume, to make sure that the child's skills haven't slipped back, and that they're able to perform in their studies and whatever else they do in English. So if you have a high school student and they have a job after school, most likely they work in a position where they have contact with customers at a store or a fast food place, and they do need to speak English to succeed in those jobs.
Follow up?
Unless you go to.
Any other questions?
Okay. That was my last slide. So I'm happy to answer any additional questions that the committee may have, or turn it over to you to move forward.
All right, committee open discussion with Dr. Pikus. Any questions about the last day and a half? Mr. Co-Chair, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Dr. Pike, is there anything that we've covered or that you have covered over the last day and a half that maybe we need to, you wanted a little extra time on? Is there anything that I don't want you to feel rushed on the preliminary report. Anything that you can think of?
Dr. Pikus.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I can't speak for my colleagues, but I'm pretty well tapped out, and I'm happy to stop at this point. And if I think of something, I'll obviously I'm in pretty regular communication with the staff, and would bring that forward to them to get to you guys. And I would also say that if after the meeting ends and you wish I'd answered a question or could say something, I'm more than happy to speak with you as we go forward. I guess there is one other thing I did want to consult with you about. I apologize. And that would be an initial round of professional judgment panels to look at these issues. The agreement that we made with the staff was to have a total of like 16 professional judgment panels, 8 in person and 8 online. And I'm sort of thinking that the two that we did on small schools are just sort of a bonus when we get to 18. Online panels are really pretty straightforward and easy to do. We get prepared, we get going, and I just have to put on a clean shirt. But in Wyoming, they're a little take a little more time. In talking with Amanda, usually APA provides additional support so that we have a team at each of the panels. We've looked at the last week in September and the first week in October as a time to do that. We'd obviously want these are the in-person ones, and my thought might be to hold off on online panels, perhaps if we need more feedback after the meeting in October, or something comes out of these panels that require us really trying to get some feedback quickly, that we could at least come and bring to you in a summary form before the October meeting. Those are much easier to set up. I'd say that the organizations that represent all of the different categories of employees in school district in Wyoming, and all the staff and the people there have been immensely helpful in helping us identify people and signing them up for the online programs very, very quickly. So, and I'm as with the in-person ones, my general thought in talking with Matt is as you may recall, the 4 we did before were in Rock Springs, Cody, Gillette, and Cheyenne. And sort of the concept of 4 corners seems to fit, but Matt suggested maybe going to different cities just to get a broader representation. And our conversation ended last night, but I'm 100% open to your telling me better. I know Wyoming pretty good, but I'd never expect to tell you I know it as well as you all do. I know school finance, you know Wyoming, and that's how we do this. But we sort of landed on Evanston, Lander, Sheridan, and Laramie. But I'm perfectly comfortable with other alternatives.
Mr. Co-Chair.
I think those are good ones. I think at some point you may want to, and maybe you have, getting a very small rural setting.
Okay.
I know that we're dealing with the funding, the challenges that really small school districts deal with now. There are not a lot of them, but there are some of them. I know I have 1 or 2 in my district. Others do as well. So just something to consider on those panels is hitting the smaller areas at least one, to see what they're struggling with or their challenges are.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I think that's a good idea. We sort of got at some of that when we did the 2 small school ones, but those were online. What I hear you telling me is I should actually see small rural schools, which I would enjoy very much. And as I briefly mentioned to you, for 20 years, I've harbored this bucket list to actually spend a little more time traveling around the beautiful state of Wyoming on my own. And these 2 weeks seem like an opportunity to try to do that among the 4 cities. And I need to do a little politics at home to be gone for 2 weeks. For the last 14 years, I've taught in Asia for 2 weeks, in October, and maybe I'm going to be home this October, but we'll see. But if I do that and we can make that work, the other thing I would really enjoy doing, if it's possible, that's exactly where I was going, Tanya. Thank you. Would be to try to meet with each of you individually or in smaller groups near your homes for a meal or just a session to meet or coffee or whatever worked out. But that was something that Tanya had suggested yesterday, and I think it would be really. I would certainly enjoy it. It meant a great deal, and I'm sure that I would learn even more about Wyoming than I already know, and that's always a good thing for me.
Mr. Co-Chair, please.
So one of the areas that you might want to consider is Du Bois. It's a small school, but it's a healthy environment. It has a new facility, but it is small, and I know they have challenges as a somewhat isolated community. They're doing good work there, but just something to think about. So,
Mr. Co-Chair, a thought that comes to mind is, as I drive around, perhaps having, what do you want to call them, small PJ panels, where I come to the school district and talk with folks for a few hours, as well as, and with the legislators from that area or not, as you all see fit, and do that as part of where we go on as well, and work with the districts along the way, and then we don't have and then we want to bring in a group of diverse folks from small rural districts, rather than making them drive the vast distances that one gets to drive in this state. We go back to the online to get them together, because there's a lot of power in people with different experiences in different parts of the state as well talking together. So we'll put together a plan to see what works, and I'll work with the staff and hopefully get more contact and have more opportunity to speak with all of you, which I'd very much enjoy.
Dr. Pikus, in Lander, we have, Fremont County, we have several small districts, not only small schools, but small districts, and it would be interesting to get their take on the funding model and what works, doesn't work as a small district. So I appreciate that you're having one in Lander and hopefully draw those districts in.
Mr. Co-Chair, I had the opportunity to go to Lander maybe in 2010 for a committee meeting once, and I would look forward to visiting again.
Plus we have the Native American tribes there.
And talking with the school districts that serve those areas might be a valuable thing as well.
Yeah, there may be some things that we need to do to help them.
So it'd be a road trip, right?
Committee, any other questions for Dr. Pikus and his team? Any other discussion? All right.
Oh,
Seeing none, thank you very much.
thank you all, and we'll be here the rest of the meeting if something comes up. So thank you very much.
All right, we will now go into public comment. Are there any parents in the room that would like to provide public comment? We'll begin with parents. Ashley, are there any online?
No, Mr. Chairman, there are not.
Okay. All right, we'll move on. Any public comment in the room, please come forward. This is the time to be heard. We have 4 seats up here. Hopefully we can keep the seats full for a while.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairs. Kristen Mayo and Superintendent Scott Crisp from Teton.
Would you scoot the mic just a little bit closer?
Sure.
Superintendent?
Is this better?
Yes.
We wanted to speak just quickly on some of the ELL questions that you all had. Our model generates for this coming year 5.4 FTEs for ELL education teachers, as well as another 10 and a half FTEs for tutors, which are the high risk. And when we're looking at the funding model, often we're saying, okay, we're allocating 5.5 teachers for ELL education. We often get quite a few newcomers in Teton County who've never been in school before, never been in a place with English language. And so a lot of the success really depends on when we get those kids, when we get those students. If we get them in elementary, where our processes are pretty successful in moving them into passing that assessment test into the monitoring stage. many times we get them in high school, and that becomes a much more difficult challenge to even have the ability to graduate them from high school. So the range of educating these students that we're constitutionally bound to educate in our community is a multi-tiered education system. And what that looks like on the ground is we don't say, okay, you're an ELL kid, you're going to be with the ELL teacher, FTE, or you're a high-risk student, we're going to put you over here in the high-risk group. What it actually looks like is a multi-tiered system of success, and it has different tiers for different levels of need. And Dr. Chris can go into this a little bit more in depth if needed. But essentially, the process really looks like we take all of the resources that were allocated, that's both in the block grant and in our federal funds through Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV, and we put all of those resources into our MTSS system. And the goal is to get every student to succeed at whatever level they're at. So whether they're in elementary school, whether they're in high school, to put as many resources as we need to have every student be successful. And so when we're talking about the funding model versus what the real life application of that looks like, it's not a one-to-one, but it is important to have enough resources to be able to address every student where they are.
Thank you, Superintendent. Representative Bear, and then Speaker Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Mayo, thank you again for being here today. Just a quick question. In your district, does your district impose a rec mill where you collect funds for things outside the funding model?
We do have a recreation district in Teton County, yes.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Mayo, just curiously, kind of intrigued me when you were talking about how many kids you work with that are, ELLs. How do you guys deal with that as far as your, basically your ranking, your ability to be able to hold your grade levels and things like that? A lot of folks are concerned about folks coming in and they're basically having to try to fight, kids that are not equipped or not ready to be able to meet the standards, and that reflects on the district. And many times the districts I've heard are looked at or examined heavily because of kids that are struggling and things like that. How have you guys managed that, and what has that impact been on your district with so many kids that are coming in? And when you said even at the high school level that have maybe never seen school, is that true?
Yes.
So how does that reflect on your grade system, on your ability to produce? I'm struggling here. I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for. Is that holding you back on your ability to be able to show performance in your district because you're struggling to get so many kids caught up, basically?
Sure.
How are you managing that, and what kind of results have you guys seen?
I wouldn't say that it holds us back. I would say that when we're measured on static numbers like the Y-top test or graduation rates, obviously that information does impact those rates. I think we do an amazing job in our district to meet every student where they are. The outcome of that is going to impact some of those static numbers, but I don't think it impacts the rest of the students. And I think that's maybe where the concern is, that we're not able to give all the students that are performing at a high level the attention that we need, and I think we do a good job of that. A couple of the systems that we've put in place, we have a dual immersion school that helps with some of the Spanish-speaking families and Spanish-speaking students for K-5. And then we've also instituted some newcomer programs in our secondary schools that help have some concentrated help on some of those students who've never seen school before, who've never really been in a community that speaks English. And we have a lot of systems in place. Dr. Pikus talked about having a community center where families can come together. And I would say, we don't have a community center, but we have a community that supports in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of organizations within our community that help support different pieces of some of these family dynamics. But what we find is probably one of the biggest challenges in educating families and students that are new to our community is engagement. We know from evidence that family engagement is important for students to be successful in school. And we've really tried to investigate and work hard to see how we can further involve the families and the parents of some of these newcomer students. And there's a little bit of resistance there.
Thank you.
Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ms. Mayo, maybe you or Dr. Chris can answer this. Do you know how many languages Teton County has students of, or how many different languages for the students that come into Teton County do we have?
Representative Yen, I can answer that. Scott Chris, interim superintendent at Teton County School District. Primarily Spanish, although we have students who come to our district with a myriad of languages, but I would say 98, 99% of our students, when we talk about a second language, is Spanish, minus a random family that will come in. We've had Mandarin families come into our district as well. If I can just take a moment, though, and like to answer the question, some of the technical questions that you brought up, Representative, on some of the educational barriers that we face. Yesterday, as I was listening to testimony, I received an email from one of our support people at Jackson Hole High School. Our principal, Bennett Lederman, is here as well. And the timing of it is interesting in this conversation. It was about 2 students who had just come into our doors that are considered newcomers, who are the ages of 18 and 19 years old. When you review that student's history, especially students who walk into our doors and request to enroll, with no formal education or no historical credits earned, it is problematic for Teton County School District. We go into educator mode and we do the best we can to place those students and support those students. That does require FTE and staffing way beyond the allotment that's allocated. And we know we're an outlier, but we do our best to support those families as they come in. And we also do a review, can the student technically graduate? In TCSD, we have the highest graduation standards in the state. We require 25.5 credits with 4 math and 4 sciences. We did that intentionally to have a robust educational program and to have kids be ready for the next level. On the flip side of that, that causes some issues when we run into these unique situations with credits. And so we are confronted with unique issues in Teton County. We fully recognize that here today compared to other districts. But at the end of the day, these are our students and families, regardless of their background, and we do our best to place them in appropriate classes with supports. That does require people.
Follow-up, Representative Yin. Representative Nyman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wonderful information. I appreciate you sharing that. The reason I asked that question is because I've had discussions with folks that say because there's kids that are coming into their districts that are not at grade level, they've not received the training that they really need to be where they're at, that the districts are basically, I don't want to use the word punished, but I mean, they're struggling or they're having a hard time being able to meet the requirements and things like that. And that's why I asked that, is how have you guys, because of the dynamic of your community, dealt with kids that are coming in that are ill-equipped to be at grade level? And how do you get them there? And what kind of consequences do you as a district, if any, get? Because maybe your averages are brought down because you've got fewer kids that are able to meet those demands. But I mean, if you're taking an 18 or a 19-year-old that's, hasn't had any formal, and you're still able to take that and move on, do you have any idea of the kind of, you talked a little bit about it, the costs incurred to be able to bring that child up, and how much, I mean, you're obviously managing it, and I admire that. And so it kind of tells me that when somebody comes to me and says, we're going to be dealing with people that don't know what they're doing, and it's going to cause our district to be looked at differently or be under a different scrutiny or something like that. I appreciate the fact that you're managing this, but what things do you need in order to make that happen, if that happens? And how do you get those kids there, I guess, is my curiosity question is, because obviously you're doing it. And so how can other districts learn from what you're doing?
Thank you, Representative Nyman, co-chairs. I think one point to be taken is because we have an ongoing influx of English language learners, we benefit from efficiencies of scale, right? We're able to put a system in place where in other schools, especially small school districts where they might have one or two and they're a surprise that come in tomorrow, they don't have the systems in place and they don't have the support in place. So I can see where other districts might be more challenged than we are because this is something that we face on a pretty regular basis. On the other hand, just maintaining the level of support that we're able to maintain. Obviously, we're going to get to the RCA evaluation next month, which I'm really excited about. But, I think the bottom line is support, the right amount of support, the right kind of support, and finding Spanish-speaking or alternate language-speaking teachers is difficult. And I would imagine it's even more difficult in communities that don't have a population like ours.
No, that's good.
What do you do when you have someone come in from Nepal, which I've heard you have?
I'll let Dr. Chris talk about that a little bit.
Great question. We follow the same process. At the end of the day, it's about providing individualized instruction to a lot of these students throughout the day versus whole group. That's where we found our most success. However, when you provide individualized instruction versus, say, a class of 25 or 20, it costs more because your allocation of resources is dedicated to a one-on-one teaching environment for most of the day versus a student being enrolled in 5 or 6 classes of 20 to 25 students, which is, doesn't cost as much, but it doesn't allow us to provide that specialized attention. So when we say English language learner, I do think it's important for us to understand that includes so many different types of students versus typically where our minds can go to. And a profile of maybe one type of student, it's so many different types of students. The other thing to keep in mind is our ELL classification is based off a student passing an access test. This shows their level of learning English, and that determines our numbers. In Teton County, we have approximately 2,900 students. We are at the point where we're around 35 to 38% Latino in our district. And out of that, I would say maybe 10 to 20% are classified as ELL because of the access test. So it's not all those students, but it's a subset of those students.
So how long, once a student is classified as an ELL learner, how long typically do they stay in that classification before they pass the level to where they can be monitored rather than actually be counted as an ELL student?
Chairman, that's an excellent question as well. It just depends on, there's not a concrete answer to that based off the age. We have some students who come into the elementary level who are classified as ELL who test out by the time they get to middle school. We have students who come into our system in middle school who will test out by high school. So it just depends on the development of that individual child and where they are in their learning of their English language.
But it could be multi-years, it could be throughout their whole school experience.
We have some students who will remain ELL for their entire school experience just based off their learning progression over time.
And Dr. Pikus has proposed that these be categorical grants. Could you speak towards categorical grants versus a block grant for these positions in this funding?
You want to speak to that?
Obviously, I'm the business manager, so I'm a fan of the block grant. I would say overall, if we measured exactly how much money we spent in our district on ELL services, it likely exceeds whatever the categorical grant would be. And a lot of that funding would overlap into some of our title funding in our consolidated grant. So really, in terms of, in general, I'm in favor of the block grant. In terms of if you split this off and made it a categorical grant, our costs would likely exceed whatever that allocation was. So we'd spend the money and then we'd still need more, and we'd seek that from other places.
So categorical grant would not hurt your efforts then?
I do not believe so.
Okay. Committee, any other further questions before we let Teton County go? Mr. Co-Chair, please.
Thank you. So since we have Teton County here, you're an anomaly, you know that,
Yes.
because of your costs. With regard to recalibration, there's recalibration and then there's Teton County. Do you feel that you've been treated fairly under previous recalibrations? And I guess my question is there anything, because now's the time to speak, is there anything under recalibration that this committee needs to take into consideration with regard to Teton County?
Yes, thank you, Co-Chair, for the question. Obviously, the regional cost adjustment is a huge piece of our funding model, and it's essential to the success of education in Teton County. As we start to examine the different pieces and the different indices that are used for the regional cost adjustment, we have relied on the WCLI to support our district and to support our teachers. When we talk about what living in our community actually looks like realistically for a teacher, it's near impossible for our teachers to ever dream of buying a house and living permanently in Teton County. So that brings us to what does it cost for somebody to rent in Teton County? And the WCLI, the way that the housing component of the WCLI is calculated is based on rents in Teton County. When you look at the different components of the WCLI, you have housing, transportation, medical, clothing, there's a series of different components that feed into that. All of those components of the WCLI can be remediated by going to Idaho Falls or Salt Lake or an outside community where you can do your grocery shopping at Costco. The one piece of the WCLI that cannot be remediated by a short trip to a larger area is our housing. So when you look at how all of those pieces feed into our cost adjustment, the most recent Wyoming Economic Analysis Division report put our regional cost adjustment at 174%. We're funded this year in our funding model at 170%. The housing component of that WCLI study is 253%. So when we talk about what does it cost for someone in Teton County to actually live in Teton County, we can't pay enough right now. We've made lots of efforts to try and make that more feasible. We have our taxpayers in Teton County passed a special excise tax to support a 24-unit apartment complex that we're in the process of building. It should open up next spring. But then again, we still have to stay competitive with those rents, because if we don't, that becomes a taxable expense for our staff. So we still, we're evaluating what those rents are going to be and how can we make it so that it's not a burden for our employees to live in a district-owned apartment complex. And all of those pieces feed in. Really, at the end of the day, I would say we need more money in our salaries just so our teachers can live in Teton County, in the community that they work in. Over the last couple of years, we've had Teton Pass close. Obviously, there was the big slide off. Many of our staff live over in Victor, Idaho, or Driggs. So they couldn't get over the pass because it was closed because the mountain fell off the side. And so then they had to go around, which makes their commute about an hour and a half or 2 hours. And we already have a significant amount of staff that are coming up from the south, the Afton Alpine area. And those staff have between an hour and a half to 2 hour commute, depending on where they live down there in the valley. What that means for us is that we get a lot of, when you look at our demographics of our teaching staff, we have the teachers that were able to buy a house in Teton County 20 years ago. And those, obviously that group of teachers is getting to be smaller and smaller. They're starting to retire. And then we have the brand new teachers that are coming to us because Jackson Hole is a fun place to live. So the majority of our teaching staff is in the 1 to 5 year range and the 20 to 25 year range. We have basically what I like to say, no middle class of staffing right now in those years between 5 and 20, because they move to Jackson, they meet the love of their life, they decide they want to have a family and they don't want to live 4 people to a house anymore. And so then they move away. So we've essentially brought them in as brand new teachers, we've trained them, we've brought them up to speed, and now they're moving on to other communities. And this is a reality that we're trying to remediate, but obviously very difficult because the reality is nobody's ever really going to be able to buy a house in Teton County.
So let me ask you this, an increase in salaries for teachers in Teton County, that isn't with the intent to buy because it's out of reach.
Correct.
So is that simply to cover the additional living expenses? And there's a lot of components here.
Sure.
The capacity of rent, housing units. Can you explain a little more to me on,
Yep.
even if we did increase the salary increases, what does that do? Does that keep them in Teton?
It would allow our teachers, thank you, Co-Chair. It would allow our teachers to be able to rent in Teton County. Right now, one of the newest apartment complexes, not ours, but a new one that's coming on board, they have a studio apartment that's about 400 square feet, and they're charging, I think, $2,500 a month for it. And
No, it's 3,000.
oh, 3,000, sorry. The reason that we would want our teachers in our community, at least more of them, is because when the pass close, when the canyon closes, whether it's fire or mudslide or whatever it is, we don't have anybody in our schools. We literally are like, how many bodies can we get in our schools to just supervise children, let alone teach children? So yes, we have the technology to do remote teaching. Our teachers can tune in from their homes, but then what does the supervision in the schools look like? So the goal is to get to a point where we at least have enough staff in the schools to supervise the children that are there, the students that are there, and then address, like, how are we now educating those students when something happens like Teton Pass closes or the Snake River Canyon closes.
Does the school district have housing?
We currently have 8 duplex units that we converted a while before we had Munger Mountain Elementary School. That's our newest elementary school that was built a couple of years ago. We had one of our elementary schools was using modular buildings. Instead of selling the modular buildings, we moved them to the other side of the district property, and we created duplex apartments with those buildings, basically repurposed them. That created 8 units for our district staff. We're building the 24-unit apartment complex. One of those is in Moran. So the likelihood of getting a teacher that lives in Jackson to live in Moran and make that commute every day is a little bit more difficult. So that's typically reserved for a teacher that teaches at Moran Elementary School.
Committee, any further questions for Teton County? Speaker Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is a major issue for you guys, obviously. I just can't imagine that for 400 square feet, $3,000. But is that what the market bears evidently in that area? And they're willing to charge that because they can get it. Does the town of Jackson work with you guys? I mean, what is the relationship looking at this? I mean, do they recognize that it's now cost prohibitive almost to be able to be educating in Teton County because it's just so much. I mean, I can't even imagine living like Representative Yin. I mean, he understands it, but
Yeah.
Is there any kind of outside relationships where they see, I mean, regulatory, how much more land do you guys have that you could develop home sites on? And what kind of regulatory issues do you face as a district? Are there, some allowances for you guys recognizing the need to make sure you have staff and they're readily available to the facility? I mean, what kind of, just curiously, shortly, I don't want to take much more time, but just what kind of obstacles are you running into in being able to provide that housing for those folks?
Thank you, Representative Nyman, co-chairs. I wouldn't say we have obstacles. The biggest obstacle is money. We have a little bit of land that we can develop for housing, but it's the money to develop the housing. We had a big win when the community passed the SPET tax. It's an extra penny special excise tax, that we were able to begin building the apartment complex. Because that money rolls in very slowly over 5 to 10 years, we were actually able to get a SLIB loan from the state to get that facility built, and then as the money from the spet tax comes in, we'll pay back the loan. I would say that between the town and the county in Teton, we all work together. This is a community issue. It's not just the schools, it's the hospital, it's physicians, it's town and county staff as well. We're all facing the same thing. And if you look at the last spet tax that our community passed, it wasn't just housing for the school district. There was county, there was hospital, there was, it's an issue that everybody's trying to address. The reality is that land is limited in Teton County, and it's very expensive to build. So we hope to be able to make a further impact, but it really comes down to the dollars.
Before you end, what about transportation? Is there anything about transportation you'd like to share with the committee? Bus leases, maintenance, anything at all?
I think you do a great job of funding transportation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Can I say one more word just to
Yes,
finish for
please.
Teton? I've been lucky enough to be in Teton County School District for 24 years. I started my career there in 1998 as a rookie U.S. history teacher. I was principal of the high school for 14 years, taught for several years, and I'm very fortunate to have the position I have right now. There are not a lot of people like me left in our district in terms of that have longevity, and that's not a criticism, that's just reality. I believe a healthy community allows families to have children, to be a family, and to stay in a community. I think we need to ask ourselves, what is a healthy community in Wyoming, not just Teton, and allowing families to develop roots, regardless if you have a mountain view or not. It's important for a healthy school community to be able to have those families intact. Kristen mentioned it earlier. That's what we're confronted with in Teton is once you get to that family stage, you leave. And it saddens me to see that sociologically. That's just where we are. And we understand people make choices in Teton County to come there. But it would be a phenomenal goal for us to really value families, value children, and families staying in our community long-term. And that's one of the primary points I wanted to make today. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay.
Good morning, Chairman Heiner. Thank you for allowing public comment this morning. Representative Nyman, I wanted to speak a little bit to your questions from yesterday.
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh,
please?
sorry about that. Yeah. Chase Christensen. I'm the State Legislative Coordinator for the Wyoming Association of Secondary School Principals. I'm also Superintendent, Special Ed Director, Tech Director, Principal, part-time bus driver, et cetera, for Sheridan County School District Number 3. Representative Nyman, to your point from yesterday, I wanted to speak just a little bit, and I know that Matt Wilmarth probably provided you guys some great details with regard to what the funding model provides for a first-year teacher, as well as the benefits side of that. In my district, our base pay for a first-year teacher is $48,000. For your comparison to the numbers that he was able to provide with the model, a teacher coming in that takes a family insurance policy in my district, that $48,000 is going to end up costing $87,865.56 with all benefits included. That ends up being about 45% of that total compensation package in benefits and 55% in cash compensation. I did want to provide the committee any opportunity. Dr. Pikus did some great speaking yesterday toward the professional judgment panels that came out of small school and small district meetings that we had a couple weeks ago. There were some fairly important pieces that came from that. And I think probably the most important piece that I could push on is the funding of fractional positions and where those end up existing for the smallest districts. I get like 0.12 of a person to be an instructional coach. And an instructional coach in a school is an extremely important piece to make sure that we're pushing our teachers forward. We're having the opportunity for them to do the learning that they need to do and be moving our school to a point where we're best serving our students. Similarly, I'm funded for a counseling position at 0.28. It's just not possible to hire somebody to come in at a 0.28 or a 0.12 level. And I do a great job of finding shares where we can share positions to get those things done. But Dr. Pikes did have some recommendations in the model to move some of those to a minimum of 0.5. And I do believe that with minimums of 0.5, it will be far easier to find a place where maybe a half librarian, half technology person could be hired to come in. And that person exists, that you could get that person hired. So I do encourage the committee to look at what Dr. Pikes was recommending in that 2025 EB model compared to where it was in 2020. On the back end of Dr. Crisp's testimony there with regard to communities, I did want to just give a little bit of a push on teacher salary this morning. The way we set salaries in the funding model communicates very directly how we respect the teaching profession. At present, the model sets base teacher pay at 75% of the comparative wage index. Whether intended or not, that signals that teaching is worth 3/4 of a job. But teaching is one of the most demanding 100% jobs that exists. I talked about our base pay at $48,000. Median priced home in our community right now is somewhere north of $400,000. I believe that a couple that are both involved in education should be able to make a living to a point where they can raise a family, buy a house in the community they live in. Now, we just heard that's probably not a reality in Teton County, but we have many other communities across the state where that right now with a base pay in the 40,000s is also not approachable for teachers where we're at. Too often the conversation about teacher salaries devolves into comparisons with the states around us. But that is a faulty starting point because nearly every one of those states has the same flawed 75% assumption baked into their salary models. For this recalibration cycle, I urge you not to be guided by what has been done before or by practices that have taken advantage of a group of professionals for far too long. Instead, I invite you to step out and set a base rate of pay that you believe is respectful of the profession, that is right, that will help recruit and retain the best, and that will drive our state's economy for generations. Teachers regularly work 50+ hours a week during the school year, and their commitment does not stop when the calendar says summer vacation. They plan, prepare, and grow professionally year-round. To describe teaching as a 39-week job simply does not reflect reality. If we recalibrated base teacher pay to 100% at the current model, starting salaries would be close to $60,000. That would be an improvement, but I believe $70,000 is closer to what it truly takes to reflect the preparation, skill, and responsibility required. I recognize that this represents a significant increase, but our students are worth the investment. I would invite each of you to reflect. If your own son or daughter were deciding on a career, would you encourage them to go into teaching? If not, what would it take for you to say yes? At its core, this is not only about numbers in a model. It is about whether we as a state respect and honor the people who dedicate their lives to educating our children. As an aside, strong compensation for teachers also supports Wyoming's broader future. Families are drawn to states with excellent schools, businesses thrive when a strong workforce is educated here, and communities grow when graduates have reasons to stay. In this way, investing in teachers is also investing in economic vitality. But the moral responsibility to honor teachers' work stands on its own. This recalibration is our opportunity to set that right. Let us move beyond comparisons, beyond old assumptions, and create a funding model that ensures teachers can live in the communities they serve, that respects the full scope of their work, and that makes teaching a profession worthy of the next generation's aspirations. Our kids and our state's future deserve nothing less. Thank you. With that, I'll take any questions from the standpoint of the funding for individual teacher versus benefits, small school and small district things within our model, as well as my commentary on state teacher pay.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Oh, Senator Brennan, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if I have, there might be a question in here, but there's definitely a comment because I've been thinking about what you hit on, which is that we pay at 75% because teachers work 75%. And what does that, I mean, obviously, to get up to 100%, it's going to cost the state more. But how do we need to balance that, but also recognize, I think we need to start thinking about, we're paying our teachers for not so much that number of hours that they're working, but for that job that they're doing in educating our kids. And so there's more of a comment there, I think, than a question.
Absolutely. And I honestly, I think if you get down to it, whether we say this is the job that's being done and it should be compensated at such a rate, or if you want to break it down and look at hours. Quite honestly, I think if you look at the hours that teachers work across the year, as I've shared with JEC, and I'm more than happy to share here, it equates to more hours than a 40-hour-a-week, 52-week job. Pretty simply. If all you do is take the 39 times 53, you get to a number that's 2,067, which is 13 hours short of a 40-hour-a-week, 52-week job. It doesn't matter how we look at it. We're not compensating what the work being done.
Follow up? All right. Thank you, Mr. Christensen.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning, not afternoon. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Charles Oski, Superintendent in Johnson County School District number 1. Just a couple key points. First, I want to go back to what Teton was saying when you don't have teachers there on snow days, or it's the same, we have the same issue in some of our rural schools, but the reality is having teachers live in your communities, they get to know your kids. There's a relationship piece that kind of helps with that. So it's a struggle. Definitely Teton is outside, is the unicorn of what that looks like. But the more we can do as districts to keep people in our communities helps build those relationships and those connections with kids that I think has a positive impact on the educational value sometimes too. And I know we all struggle that, but their struggles are definitely unique. But I can't even imagine if you can't get a group of teachers over there and if they have to drive 2 hours to go home, which all of us sometimes do, some of those connections aren't being made because they're not there. So just a quick point there. But back to the ELL, or what we reference it as ESL in Johnson County, when we talk about where we put it either in the block grant or we put it outside the categorical grant, is that's a critical component of us actually qualifying for federal grants. So Johnson County is an example. We went through what I call a corrective action plan because we didn't have systems in place. No matter whether we had 1 kid or whether we have 100 kids in the district, we still have to have an approved program by the state in order to qualify. Well, we don't have enough kids to qualify for Title III. So we do have to use the funding to make sure that they're trained. So we went through a process to be reapproved so that we can get approved for federal grants, which is our Title I and other things. So with that, the current funding model provides us a 0.07, which is $6,640. However, we are spending $16,500 just to make sure we have somebody in the building that's trained. So when somebody does show up, which we did, and we didn't have the proper training, that we can actually meet the needs of those kids when they come in. So just as a clarification, I would kind of like to go back what Mr. Christensen just said is that 0.07 doesn't really necessarily meet the needs. And we can't just say we're going to pay for it out of Title I because there's a different group of kids. So we're all starting to experience some of that. So with that piece, just to point out, ELL it's referenced, now it's referenced as English as a second language. There are some criteria, you get audited on it, you're held accountable for it, but it's also something that needs to be in place in every district, whether you're small or large, in order to make sure you're qualifying for the federal grants, which then we use in our schools to make sure we're meeting the needs of kids and at-risk kids in other areas. So just as a quick point, if there was something we could do, you've seen in the model, it's 1 for every 100 students. Okay, it would be nice to have at least a minimum of 0.5 or a 0.1 per district so that we make sure we can meet the needs, have teachers that are trained, because there is some training and qualification behind that. We actually right now have 3 students that meet the criteria, and we have 5 students that are on the monitoring. And Representative Nyman, you were talking about that over the next 2 years. So that's a success story. So they come in, they qualify, and now we're moving them through in there into the monitoring. That should be the reminder we're doing it right, which is something pretty exciting for us in Johnson County to say in the last 2 years, we're moving the needle with those kids. So that's just a point of clarification to bring there. You also asked, I think it was Senator Salazar, you asked about transportation. So I was fortunately a part of a bus burned down. Our whole bus barn burned down, and all of our buses burned down in Sheridan 3 several years ago. Well, we got an opportunity to replace buses. Those buses at that point in time, we replaced them at $125,000, which at that point I thought was a lot. Looking at it, the state bid for buses this year came in between $220,000 and $235,000 to replace a bus. So the cost difference of a bus just in that simple period of time over the last 8 years is doubled just to put a bus on the road. Also, you have now emissions. So you'll start to hear a lot of people talking about they're run with diesel engines, which those of you that are in the ag industry know that that's not the most liked piece of any type of truck that pulls cattle down the road or tractor. Those are things we're dealing with so they don't have buses stranded. So there's a lot more emissions and things of that nature that we are seeing with buses from our point of view that require routine maintenance to make sure they're up and going. But that is a struggle that we do see with some of that transportation. And then the other part, we are just rural Wyoming. So I want to say Representative Nyman asked yesterday, how many miles are we traveling with activities? And as you put those numbers together, you'll probably be shocked at the amount of travel there is. But again, the maintenance of the buses is probably the bigger thing. And then the last thing to end with is I want to say, as you take a look at the teacher's salary, and we're always heard, we've been surveyed, what are you doing to recruit and retain? And I want to focus on the retain piece. In the current model that we are looking at right now, after 20 years, the state funding model does very little to support veteran teachers. As a matter of fact, I think it's like $200, but I don't want to be quoted on that. If you're just going through the model and you get $1,000 a year, and then after 20 years, you only get $200, we are at a point with staffing, we want to recruit and retain. Well, those are our master teachers. Those 20-plus year teachers, we should be valuing them a little bit more. So just encourage you to look at the model, that piece of that portion, because I really don't know of many districts that after 20 years, they start cutting that, if they do give steps, what that looks like. So just encourage you to look at that. And then the last thing I want to say is, I appreciate the work you're doing because I see the challenges that are in front of all of us. So with that, allowing us to come to the table, have public comment, a lot of respect for that. I encourage you to reach out to any of us or come visit any of our schools in the future because this is real and the education of our kids in Wyoming is critical. So thank you, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Superintendent. Co-Chair Salazar.
Thank you.
And then we'll go over here to Speaker
So-
Nyman.
You bring up what we're paying master teachers and the added bonus as seniority grows. Give me a number. How much more on a yearly basis should we consider paying master teachers to keep them?
Not saying giving them more, just being consistent throughout the time. So just because of 20 years, there shouldn't be a difference or a drop in what we're funding. I'm not saying that we should add a bonus to that, but somebody's there. We shouldn't, as a district, say, oh, we're going to receive less after 20 years. It should be just that consistent piece until they retire. So I'm not asking you to say, oh, after 20 years, we're going to give a bonus. But just as a theoretical example, up to 20 years in the model, if with the step and lane, you get $1,000, the district does to help support that teacher. After 20 years, it drops to $200. So I'm just saying be consistent with the model throughout their retirement. That's all I'm saying.
Speaker Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Superintendent Oski, what do you think we should be at statewide as our base pay? We've already got one figure written down here from Mr. Christensen. King for a day. What would you like to see?
King for a day.
As your base salary? I mean, what would you think that would pull people in and make it easier for the districts to be able to hire good people that are going to do a good job and stick with it? I genuinely want to know, what do you think the districts need to be at?
So I'm gonna speak as Johnson County School District number 1. And us have to be, because we need to be competitive with the districts around us. So we're at 49,000 right now. In order for us to recruit and retain, we're competing with $53,000 to $56,000 base for other districts. That's just, that would be
That's based on your, the ECS, I mean, what is it? Yeah, but average daily membership, but I mean, as far as the cost of, cost of living. RCA, yeah, is that based on that, or I mean, just because?
So every district gets a different RCA, absolutely. So what that is based on is when we are looking to recruit and bring teachers in, and we interview a teacher, and they might be interviewing in 3 or 4 other districts, because those are the ones you're going after. We are finding ourselves in a position, well, this district's offering me 53,000, your base is 49. So we get into that competitive piece. So when I'm speaking to you as a superintendent, our goal is to get up and start to be competitive. When we get that new, young, enthusiastic teacher that's coming out of college, and we can be competitive with the other districts, that is ultimately what I'm competing with right now, is a base salary of 53 to 56,000. Is it a goal to get there? Absolutely. Here's our struggle why we're not there yet. That struggle why we're not there yet is we're actually going through a transition of, we are down 200 students, well over 200 students now since 2020. So as we're looking at reduction of staff and the number of FTEs, and what the model finds is we have an initiative to get to that point so we can put the money into teacher salaries and bases. But to answer your question, we would love to say a very large number to recruit, but then you become competitive. What is another district doing, and what are they adding? My competitive thing that we have to look at right now, what I'm competing with, is a base salary of 53 to 56,000. That's what Johnson County is focused on getting to, so we can at least be competitive.
Okay, thank you.
And I apologize, Representative Nynum, because it's such a broad answer, but I'm always going to have to compete with people our size.
Go ahead. And that's my question. And so you've already established that you've got districts that are competing against each other. And so then it boils down to, well, aesthetics. Quite frankly, I'm going to go live in a place where I've got mountains in the back of my house, and I can go trout fish, and I can hunt, and all these different things that mean more to other people. So they'll maybe take that into consideration. But if you're having to compete against another district that is close enough that they can drive over there, and you're still competing and you're short $4,000 per year, that puts you at a disadvantage. So that's my curiosity. How would this look to be able to put all of the districts on more of a level playing field where you guys have the ability to be able to offer those things? And so, but there's a lot of differences and variances in Wyoming. And so how do we factor those things into this that keep teachers working in the school districts, qualified, good, high-quality people, and help you guys be able to have the dollars that you need to get those people to come to your facility? But if there's another district that's close to you that's headhunting, and they've got the dollars because of what it costs to live in their community, do they take into consideration, well, you might get a larger check, but you're not going to get any more ultimately. It's going to cost more to live there. And so there's just a lot of things.
Which is a recruitment piece for us. Our class sizes might be smaller, they might not be larger. So those are all things we look at. What we look at for our benefit packages, and more importantly, what the salary schedule itself looks like.
Sure.
All right. Any other questions for Superintendent Oski? Profits, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned the rather incredible increase in the cost of buses. And we looked at those on the Education Committee maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and tried to improve the acquisition process for the state, where we had common bidding and tried to bring those costs down. And then I think we did a few other things with regard to the lifetime that we were going to utilize those buses. Is that something that we should revisit? Is that system, I mean, the prices went up, but is that system overall working as we intended? Or is that something that we should revisit, maybe not through recalibration, but maybe through education?
Yeah, Chairman and Senator Roufus. Well, I'll just be honest with you. When I sat down with my transportation director and said, oh, so what did the state bid come in at, knowing that we revisited the process, I made him repeat that number a couple times. I'm saying, what? Because, you know, whether it's a loan that pay back, there's a process. So my short answer to you, yeah, we might need to relook at that. We might need to relook at a couple different components of what that looks like in the mileage and things. But just for me, honestly, to say 8 years ago, I paid $125,000 and now the state average is over a bid process, not just Johnson County went out and looked for a bid. That was your state bid. You know, between that 200, you know, just theoretically, let's say $220,000, $240,000 for a bus, that's an extreme amount of money increase with buses. And I know they transport our most valuable cargo in the state of Wyoming, but to keep them up and running, that means that cost also means there are a lot more technology involved with those systems. But it might be something to maybe take a look at, because there's a cost to that too.
Mr. Chairman, follow up, yeah, and I mean, I found that striking as well, that it had gone up by that amount, and I'm wondering if there's any more to the story of why it went up that amount. I don't know if there's anything else you know that can help, that can justify that $100,000 differential.
I don't, and if it is a different number, then I'll definitely talk with my transportation director about it, but that's the number he presented me, which is something, again, we have to deal with, because you also have to remember, it's reimbursable a year later. So some of those factors and things come into place. It's not reimbursable instantaneously. It's a reimbursable the following year with what some of those costs are.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Mr. Chairman, if our procurement process is leading to a bad bid outcome in some way, because that does just seem entirely irrational. So something to get to the bottom of. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you. Speaker Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just being we're on transportation and your experience, what do you think about contracting transportation? I have other states that are contracting. I have South Dakota, they contract their busing for their schools and they put out a bid process, and others take the responsibility of hiring people, paying for liability, maintenance, procurement, all of that. Do you ever see that as a potential option for Wyoming, or what are your thoughts on that?
Great questions. I'm going to see the complexity of when you get the numbers to how often in travel and where we travel, maybe with activities is where it's at. I don't see it being successful in communities if we're providing that transportation to and from school for the educational purpose of things. I think there's just a lot of complexity to that if we try to hire it out, so. But again, I want to say, I'm not the resident expert of that. There are some softwares and things out there. We just bought a new software that's going to help us manage our routes. So if we do have somebody sick, how can we reroute things to meet the needs of the kids for the routes that we have promised? In Johnson County or Buffalo themselves, we're down drivers, can't get drivers so we've actually closed our in-town routes and we just provide routes out of town. But we still are advertising for bus drivers to try to do the in-town piece. So having a company provide that service when it's really still the same number of people that want to drive those buses might be the same difficulty.
All right, thank you, Superintendent. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 15-minute break.
Sorry.
And then we'll resume after that. So we'll resume at 10:35. Okay, well, welcome back. We'll continue with our public testimony. And we have an empty chair up front here if anyone wants to come on up. So let's get started, ma'am. Well, ladies are first in my book. That's the way my mother raised her kids.
Co-Chair Salazar and Heiner, members of the Recalibration Committee. I'm Kate Mead. I'm from Teton County. I'm a parent of 2 graduates of Teton County schools, both now engineers and living and working in Jackson, and the grandparent of 2 elementary school kids at Jackson Elementary School who live across the meadow on our ranch. I don't want you to think that Teton County just was able to take our high percentage of ELL learners and, figure out immediately how to deal with that. It took a long time. So, we eased into this number of high ELL kids over the years. When my kids were in school, when my boys were in school, there were starting to be more and more ELL kids in our schools. But it took a while. And my first year on the school board, which was 16 years ago, we started looking into a dual immersion school, which ultimately we have done. But not only do we have ELL learners at the dual immersion school, but we also have them in the regular classroom. So I'm talking about K-5. And over the years, we found that the kids who are in the dual school and the K-5 kids who are in the regular school, which I would call total immersion, are doing about the same. We were told along the way that we could never get those ELL kids to proficiency levels on the state YTOP until 5th grade. I mean, teachers told us this, administrators thought this. Well, last year we proved them wrong because all our schools in 2024 were proficient. I'm super proud of that, but it hasn't been easy. And a lot of it has been the result of, I hate to say experiment because you want to experiment with kids, but trying different methodologies of getting those kids to proficiency levels. When they test out of ELL, it's a big celebration because, those kids have come a long, long ways. It's very, very inspirational. My granddaughter is in 1st grade, and she and her brother, who's a 2nd grader, really learned how to read in kindergarten, in the second half of kindergarten. And they're both really good readers. Now, a lot of children, it's really hard for them to learn to read, harder than my grandchildren. I understand that. But it's important to know that the Latino kids generally, although we have Vietnamese kids, Moldovan kids, Ukrainian kids, the kids who don't speak English when they come into kindergarten and are mainstreamed, I've seen the teachers in action and they bring them along with the other kids. And their test scores are almost the same, maybe better than the dual school. So we have these 2 ways of teaching these kids, and we have to say, not sure which works better than the other, but they work. The other thing I would say is that, we do have these newcomers that show up in high school. Our graduation levels are in the mid-90s. So even those kids who show up late, we manage to get through all the classes they need to graduate. It seemed impossible to me a couple years ago when our former superintendent, Gillian Chapman, told me that we had 60 newcomers show up in January, unaccompanied minors for the most part. And by golly, we got those kids graduated. when you asked about Nepalese kids, because of our climbing community in Jackson, we've had Sherpa kids come to our schools over the years, managed to get them through as well. So those challenges can be met. I have concern as a school board member also that sometimes I've worried that our resources are being expended too much on the ELL learners versus the kids who are born in Jackson Hole. But we've done comparisons of our schools, the elementary schools across the district, and it's shown that we're spending about the same amount for each school, although the principals, of course, are able to use the block grant to make sure that they have enough staff. And in the case of the dual school, dual speakers. Many teachers who teach at the dual school are not dual speakers. They may be English speakers, and they can teach math or something like that. But it has certainly been a challenge, and I didn't want you to think that that happened overnight. It's taken years. I've been 16 years on the school board, and over that period of time, we've gotten better and better at working with these ELL kids. It's a tough haul, but we've managed to do it. I wanted to tack on, it looks like about 60% of our teachers' income is paid for housing. Now, I think the federal government says that 30% of a person's income should be paid for in housing. So, people are making sacrifices to live in Jackson. So we're very lucky that people are willing to do that. But year to year, we wonder if that will continue. As Superintendent Crisp indicated, we have enough teachers. We just hired the last certified that we needed. But you wonder year to year whether that's going to hold. So we are a unicorn. I don't mean to suggest that other school districts don't have these same issues. Of course they do. But I just wanted to point out that, we have spent a lot of time making this work, and it's not that easy. With regards to transportation, I just want to bring up one issue that really sort of has been annoying me. We are a 4A school, and the Wyoming High School Athletic Association has divided the state east-west. So our kids compete against Gillette. Our tennis team last fall went there, 3 times in like 2 weeks. That seems to me ridiculous. And the Wyoming High School Athletic Association, I know it's not affiliated with the state really, but they don't have a lot of incentive to reduce bus trips. And not just because of the money. For me, it's the kids' time outside of school. You've got to have kids in school, and a lot of times those kids who participate in athletics are our high flyers, our high test score kids. We want them, in the school to be able to help other kids along. So if we did it east-west, it would be so much more sensible. And we'd save the state, I think, a lot of money in transportation costs. The other thing I wanted to bring up is health insurance. I know you're going to discuss that later, but I can't imagine that there would not be economies of scales in having health care for schools throughout Wyoming on the state plan. Having all our school districts have separate health care, to me, seems like, it's redundant administratively. And it seems to me like that's something that should definitely be examined, because our healthcare costs are probably 1/5 of our budget that you pay to us. And I think there's got to be a better way of doing that. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. I stand for questions.
Thank you for your testimony. That's very informative. Any questions for Ms. B? Representative Baer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Mead, for being here and providing that information. Couldn't agree with you more about the Wyoming High School Athletic Association and the lack of incentive for reducing the need for additional busing. So appreciate that comment. I wanted to ask you about your district, a couple of things. I noticed that your, your starting salary is 9% below the model. Specifically, the model is $74,983 for starting salary, and your starting salary is $68,369. Can you explain the reasoning behind that?
Well, over the years, we have made some big increases in salary. I think our average salary is $78,000. I'm not the numbers person on salary, but a few years back, we did a 10% increase for all staff. I think, I'm going to be honest with you. When the legislature did not provide the ECA for several years, it put schools back on their heels. So, we found ourselves in a situation having paid, 10% to teachers that we were struggling to make up for that. I think that in order to keep teachers, obviously, we're going to have to pay them more. I mean, we have relied on, young teachers, couch surfing, basically, to be able to stay in Teton County. And, when you're a professional and you're a young person, you want to have a place to live, at least, that you can afford. And it just doesn't happen there. I think Kristen Mayo, who grew up in Jackson Hole, who is a former speaker, can talk to you more about the salaries and how that worked.
Follow up? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your comment about the ECA because, this legislature did approve an ECA that would bring us up to speed. And I appreciate the fact that you point out that previous legislatures have not done a great job at that. But we're taking that very seriously. It's a much more conservative legislature, but they take education funding seriously. So I appreciate you pointing that out. My question specifically, though, was, why is Teton County below the model? Because what I'm hearing is a lot of testimony about, we need to raise these salaries so that you can keep the teachers you want to keep and you can hire the teachers you want to. And you just mentioned, 60% of their income is going to housing. But here we have a model that clearly gives you almost 10% more, and yet it's not being chosen to do that. Do you have any?
I don't have the answer to that. You'd have to talk to our business manager.
Mr.
I
Chairman.
have a couple more questions, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Then we'll-
Do you know, and this might be a question for you, Ms. Mayo, as well. Do you know if your district has had any surpluses in recent years? That would be really helpful to understand. And Ms. Mead, do you sit on the rec board for that rec mill that I asked about earlier?
Co-Chair Salazar and Heiner, Representative Baer, our entire district board does sit on the rec board, yes.
Ms. Mayo, do you have an answer about the surpluses?
Co-chairs, thank you. Representative Baer, what surpluses, like cash surpluses?
Yes, like at the end of the year, your expenses were less than your revenues based on the model and the block grant.
In the last couple of years, we have not had surpluses. We actually, our board dipped into our cash reserves, as we're calling them, to advance. We front-loaded the RCA. When you're looking at the base salary in the district, there's two different figures that are often talked about in these legislative sessions. One is the average teacher salary, and one is the base salary. So if you are creating a matrix for teacher pay, and you use the base salary as your first step one, lane one, and you make that equal to the base salary in the model as it's calculated, what happens is as you grow that matrix out over time, your salaries across the matrix exceed the average teacher salary in the model. So what ends up happening is you're exponentially increasing the salaries. when we build our teacher matrices and all of our matrices, we're looking at what the average salary in the state is, and we take what our average teacher experience is. So let's say our average teacher experience is 8 years and they have a master's. So that's actually where I start in building out our teacher matrices, because then I end up with more accurate numbers coming out. And what that does is it actually incentivizes our teachers to stay longer because they have more growth potential moving forward. So when we're talking about how we design our compensation package and how we incentivize teachers to stay, because as I spoke about earlier, that's one of the biggest challenges we have is it's not hard for us to get those teachers 1 to 5 years. It's hard for us to get the teachers 5 to 20 years. So if we built our matrix around just the base salary, what would end up happening is they wouldn't have as much growth over time. And that's what we want. We want to incentivize teachers to stay in our district. And the way that we can design our matrix to do that is to have maybe a slightly lower base pay, but overall our average teacher salary does match up with the average teacher salary in the matrix once you feed in the regional cost adjustment.
Follow-up? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think it's pretty clear that the school districts really don't have to follow the model. The block grant goes to you. You guys can do whatever you really would like. And so, as I'm hearing these concerns about that middle gap, you've got the young teachers that are new, and then you've got the elderly teachers. I guess my question would be, why wouldn't you build your pay scale such that, you're taking care of both of those? You have a history now that's the base that you're going to have. Why wouldn't you want to take care of the people that you already have? I know you want to try to fill in the gap in the middle, but wouldn't you want to focus on those? Do you have a response to that?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I think that speaks to a well-rounded district is going to have teachers and staff in all 3 of those categories. I do believe that the way we have our matrices set up now does incentivize the teachers to stay in our district. We don't have a hard time recruiting the 1 to 5 year teachers. So I do feel like we take care of those teachers. And when we're advertising, recruiting, we get tons of applicants. The one biggest issue that we have is how can they afford to live in Jackson? And we have a couple of ways that we can help people do that. The 1 to 5 year teachers are usually fresh out of college, and they figure it out. They find a way to come to Jackson. The reason that we have designed the compensation package the way we have is to try and get those longer standing teachers, because it's important for our students to have experienced teachers in the classroom. To answer your question, we could do it that way. These are questions we have every year. How do we incentivize our staff with the dollars that we have to do what we want them to do? Even talking about some of the substitute questions yesterday, it's always interesting to hear how the funding impacts and leads to the conversations about spending, because you're right, it's a block grant model. And every district is going to do, and every board is going to decide what the best path for that district is and how we can best serve our kids in our own communities. When you talk about substitute teachers, figuring out what that base pay for substitute teachers is, that's also a community effort. In Teton County, we have just as many challenges finding substitute teachers as we can. We end up having a high quality number of very few substitute teachers. So how can we get them to work more? So in our design of our compensation package, we've gone in and we've said, okay, if you work 3 days, this is the rate. And that's tied back to that step 1, lane 1 of the teacher certified matrix. But then if they work more than 3 days, we actually pay them more. And that has helped us not only retain our subs, but incentivize them to work more days in the month than just the 3 days or just randomly picking up a day or 2 here. They start to think about that. So when you think about, okay, this is how we're going to fund schools, but then this is how we're actually going to incentivize our staff to do what we want them to do and do what we need them to do, the design of the compensation package is a little bit different. So yes, we could change the way that we formulate our matrix, but then we're going to miss out on the middle gap. And that's really our target right now, is to get the middle gap filled, at least a third.
Follow-up.
Okay, follow-up.
Thank you for this additional question, Mr. Chairman. You had mentioned that you had ways of incentivizing people to get past the housing issue. Can you expound on that comment?
Sure. We have, community members that want to have long-term solid renters. So we have an internal email group that people can say, okay, we're going to offer our long-term rentals at a lower rate because they want steady, dependable renters. If you're trying to get the most for your rental in Jackson, you're going to end up with a lot of turnover and probably someone who's not going to take as much care. So that's one way. We're building as much housing as we can. Excuse me. And then also the community programs with affordable housing. The county has an affordable housing program. If you're in one of those high needs areas, let's say EMT, hospital, you get a little bit more value for your years that you've spent in the valley. So they can also qualify to buy an affordable house in Teton County. The affordable housing, I live in an affordable house. The affordable housing in Teton County is really like a savings account for your rent. You still have the expenses of having a mortgage and paying interest and doing all of those things, but eventually you'll get whatever you've put into it out of it. So it's not, we're not seeing the appreciated values of the real estate, but it does give us stable housing for the time that we work for the school district.
One last question. Do you know what the value of a mill is in Teton County?
I do. Let's see, about $2 million.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Yin.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, a mill, I think the assessor just reported literally like 2 weeks ago, a mill is 3.8 million.
Oh, 3.8,
in Teton
sorry.
County.
It's gone up.
Mr. Chairman, I'd actually like some clarification on Representative Baer's question, because he was asking why our base salary is lower than the model salary, but if you make the base salary the same as the model salary, then your average salary is always going to be above the model salary. So no matter what district it is, you still have to have some range where the average salary gets near the model salary, or they decide that they want to put more in teacher salary, so the average ends up being higher than the model salary. But I don't think I'm curious on what the reason behind the question of asking why the base salary doesn't match the model salary when ideally it shouldn't.
So we're taking questions from the public and not from each other at this time, Representative.
In co-chairs, we are funded based on the average salary in the model.
Right. Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Mullen.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen. I'm the Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. I want to touch on a few things. Obviously, we don't have the information about salaries. We're going to have that conversation in October, but I think we've had some good groundwork here. And to those members of the Joint Education Committee, I apologize for any repetition that you may hear today. So we've had questions from the committee, what should we be looking at in terms of salaries? First and foremost, that needs to be cost-based, right? And we live in a global economy. So our districts don't just compete with districts within the state, they compete with other states as well. And we've seen that in some of the reports in the interim from the colleges that we receive our educators from. So Mr. Christensen pointed out Dr. Stoddard's evaluation of comparative salaries, and that's how she develops that 75th percentile number. So Wyoming Education Association has long taken issue with the methodology in terms of arriving at that 75th percentile. We agree with Dr. Christensen, or Mr. Christensen, that that needs to be reevaluated. There's bad data, there's good data, and then there's better data. The better data that is out there, the RAND Corporation provides an evaluation. It's called the State of Teachers every year, and their surveys Their survey are nationwide in terms of hours worked and a number of other components. Those pieces from the RAND Corporation provide better insight in terms of those hours worked that actually develop that comparable salary. I'm happy to provide that to the committee members. So that's something for you all to take into consideration. Obviously, we'll have that conversation in October as well, but I did just want to ping that for you. I do want to have a conversation about a little bit of the recruitment and retention issue that has come up here today. In the Joint Education Committee, we had presented, and one of the largest responses from Wyoming teachers specifically on what policies you all could do to improve recruitment, retention, and morale is do not increase classroom size. That was the #1 policy that respondents from Wyoming, teachers in Wyoming, said that you all could do that would have an improvement on their morale. Now, one of the things that has been floated in past years, and I believe I've heard it in discussions, is pulling teacher salaries out of the model. Again, I'm going to come back to some of the previous conversations we've had about what that does, what that looks like. The model doesn't operate in whole numbers, all right? So we've heard about, you have a 1.2 FTE or a 1.38 FTE. The problem is that if you pull teacher salaries out of the model, what you will unintentionally do is increase classroom sizes, because as you have heard, districts don't have the ability. How are you going to hire a 1.12 FTE? How are you going to hire a 1.12 FTE? What they'll do is that classroom size increases because that's based on that ADM calculation, all right? So what will end up happening is districts aren't going to hire a 0.2, a 0.12. You're going to unintentionally increase classroom sizes. So I just want you to be aware that that is an unintended consequence of that policy. Finally, and just because these discussions don't happen in a bubble, we do have a federal context within which we operate. I did want to provide some information to you all just so that you have it. Currently, Congress is entering into budget discussions, and those current budget discussions may have the potential of impacting Title I funds, as we have heard, for English language learners, at-risk students, and a number of other categories. So currently, the president's budget proposal is to cut 12 categorical grants out of the 12 grants from that Title I funding. For the state of Wyoming, we are one of the most significant hit. It's $27 million that we stand to lose that would go towards our English language learners, some of our teacher prep for those students. So obviously that is in the works. There's a lot of development, but something for you to keep your eye on, just because we obviously don't live in that bubble when we're having these conversations about our ELL students and our Title I funds. So, and I'm happy to provide some of that information to you as well if you would like. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
All right, any questions for Mr. Mullen? Senator, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious. I've kind of heard yesterday quite a few times, a lot of schools are down on ADM. Do you have an idea of what that number looks like for the state?
Chairman Heiner, Representative McCowan, I don't have that exact number, but I can get that to you.
Thank you.
Follow up, Mr. Senator? Okay.
Just need to know the number.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Mullen? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Jeff Jones. I'm the superintendent at Sheridan School District Number 1, representing Tongue River and Bighorn communities. I have an interesting story that is relevant. I think I moved to Wyoming from a neighboring state in 2007. At that time, the salaries in this state took a huge increase, and I think we know the history behind that. I noticed that a lot of people were doing the same. And so what I learned at that time is that some of your best cream of the crop types of educators realize that they don't need to settle. They don't need to do the same job somewhere else for 25% less money. And so my assumption is if things improve with salaries here, we're going to see a different salary pool, in not just in numbers of people, but the quality of people is going to change as well. After 6 years of being an administrator here in Wyoming, I took a job to teach full-time at a community college in Wyoming in the teacher education department. And I loved the job. I was poor when I did it, but I loved the job. It was an honor to teach students going to school to become teachers. It's relevant, though, to this conversation that there were huge misconceptions that I picked up on right away from students thinking about pursuing a degree in education. The first one was that they would have complete autonomy, that they would be handed their resources to teach for the year, and they would have their silo of kingdomness to do what they wanted to do, and very rarely be expected to collaborate or work a lot with a lot of other people. They would have that autonomy. Not true at all. The second big misconception was that they would be judged on their ability to deliver instruction, as opposed to whether the students were actually learning or not. That's changed. When I started teaching in 1993, I was given stacks of textbooks for my different classes, my set of keys, and I was judged on how entertaining, engaging, and organized I was in delivering the material. Education is not that way anymore. Very far from it, as a matter of fact. The other misconception, I think, is that people going into education think they can make enough money to get all the things they want as an adult coming out of school. Unfortunately, that's not true. And that's not just in education. That's some struggles in all of our society with different occupations. And then the final one, I would say, was that they had a misconception that their love of content would sustain them. And what they found was that little Johnny's pursuit to derail their lesson was consistent and unrelenting. And so they needed to understand that it's not just about teaching math to students. It's really about teaching students math. As we move forward, I want to answer Representative Neiman's question directly. I believe you asked, what's a number? I feel like three things come to mind. What's the relative training and expertise required in this field? Knowing what is needed to fulfill the job, not like it was in 1993, but now. What's the demand? And I think that's more than just a competition with other states, but it's a competition with other career fields. It doesn't take long to ask ourselves, other career fields that have maybe similar education requirements pay much better. I have a son that just went into the nursing field. He's making far more beginning as a nurse than he would have if he had become a school teacher. And then finally, what's the value? What's the value to our society? I fully admit I'm biased. As a 32-year educator, I think it's the most important job in the world. I accept that bias on my part, but I also feel like it's relevant to what we're doing. We're creating the very future. And if you want the best, knowing that the cream of the crop, no, they don't need to settle, not in terms of what school they choose to go to, or even if they choose to go into this career at all. I think all three need to be considered. With that, I would say 65,000, comparing it to all other career fields, not out of question. Our current salary right now in District 1, last year was $48,401. That was the base salary, $48,401. This year, $52,273. That's 8%. There's a popular podcast going around the state that said only one school gave the 8.5%, and we were quoted in that podcast, Sheridan District 1 gave 6-something%. Not true. But we're doing the best we can, and we have some positives in our way because we're growing. We're increasing enrollment. That helps a lot. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. But I wanted to be direct with Representative Neiman's question, and I'll stand for any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent Jones. We have some questions over here. We'll start with Senator Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question. You mentioned your son that's a nurse that's making more. Is he working nights, weekends, holidays, or is he like more in a doctor's office where he's working 8 to 5?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Brennan, he is working in a clinic in the city of Sheridan, and it's Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Okay. Senator McCune.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You caught my interest on one thing. These teachers, do they want to be anonymous or anonymous? All on their own? And wouldn't that be better, in your opinion? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman and Senator McCune, I'm not sure if I completely understand the question. I think what my point was, students have a misconception that I noticed. I think they view the role of a teacher as just coming in, preparing a lesson, independent of working with other teachers at all, and coming in and delivering the lesson with very little collaborative work with other teachers. And what they have come to find out is that, especially through the professional learning communities model and also the multi-tiered systems of support, there's an entire research base in the last 20 years, particularly around professional learning communities, that it takes much, much more than teachers teaching in a silo and having complete autonomy. The actual success rates for student learning when you do that are really bad.
Follow up, Senator?
I meant to say autonomous, but it's okay. I'm not a school teacher.
Thank you.
I just kind of picked up on when you said you started and they gave you the keys and the books and kind of patted you on your head and sent you your merry way. So I just wanted to know if the collaboration does that or not. So I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further questions, thank you, Superintendent.
Mr. Co-Chair and Committee, I'm Travis Pearson, Wyoming PLS 10566. It's my privilege to serve as the Johnson County School District 1 Board Chair. I've spoken to you before that the going rate of professional services in Wyoming in civil engineering, which has a very comparable work schedule and demand on number of hours. Ours are all in the summer and we're real slow in the winter, so opposite but similar. The going professional service rate is $70,000. To your question, sir, if I could say king for a day and what does the base pay need to be, the current $44,108 is woefully insufficient. It's just causing terrible trouble. 70,000 is, I believe, the right answer because they're doing about the same work. We work close with our hospital district. I know that they're doing openings at about 90,000 for new nurses, but as was pointed out, that's a on-call and weekend evening profession. So there's a gap in that zone though, but I'd like to ask you guys to just ponder this for me. I had a employee from the district tell me that they'd been in education their whole life and their child graduated this year and was talking about going into education. They said, if you want to work for a district, you had better get a degree in speech pathology, or the return on investment that you'll spend getting the necessary degrees and credentials isn't ever going to be what it should. So speech pathologists, sometimes we can hire one and we try real hard to get them in the districts, but that pays enough better that it's significant, and educators are telling their kids that. So what would it be worth to be able to have our teachers and other people like me, I'm a father of an 8th grade daughter and a 5th grade son, be able to say, no, you should think about being a teacher. You're pretty good with empathy and you like working with little kids. Right now, it's a tough sell, at least from a father's point of view. And with that, that's all I really came to say. But I'll take questions if you have them.
Any questions for Mr. Pearson? Speaker Nyman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just curiously, speech pathology, what drives that market? I mean, are we seeing an exponential increase in the need for it? I mean, what drives that higher?
Yes, sir, we do have additional need for it. And it's also a real tough niche to find. It's one of those demand more than supply issues in my perspective. But yeah, it's hard to find them, and so they command a high dollar. We have to contract that, and we spend pretty big to get those services required of us.
Any other questions for Mr. Pearson? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you very much. Any other public comment? It looks like we have a coffee up here if you want to come and talk. Oh, okay. All right, any other public comments? Public testimony? Seeing none, we will close public comment. And now we'll go on. The agenda is educational health insurance. So Wyoming Employees Group Insurance, Tricia back. Oh, we have Mr. Wilmarth. I missed your name on the top of the list. I'm so sorry.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Matthew Wilmarth, LSO Senior School Finance Analyst. Just to kind of give you a framework of what this topic revolves around is there were several requests regarding how health insurance is funded in the education resource block grant model, how districts actually fund health insurance. And so today's presentation, there's kind of 4 entities that'll speak on this. The first is myself. I'm going to provide you an issue brief within your meeting materials and kind of give you the lay of the land of how health insurance is resourced through the education resource block grant model. Then we have the state's employees group insurance program folks. They'll be online. I don't know if we'll get to them before lunch or not. And then we have 2 insurance trusts, which majority of the school districts belong to, that provide health insurance. And so that is the Wyoming School Board Insurance Trust and then the Wyoming Educators Benefits Trust. And so those are the folks that you'll hear from today. And so with that opening comment, Mr. Chairman, I'll touch briefly on my issue brief and then leave it to you on how you want to break this up over lunch or because it'll take some time. Great. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is item 18-01, issue brief dated August 25th, 2025 on the health insurance component within the block grant model. The 2005 recalibration effort set this component in motion on how it's resourced in terms of funding for school district health insurance within the funding model. It is based upon the state of Wyoming's employee group insurance premium rates. And it looks back to those rates set on January 1st of the preceding school year or the prior school year. And it uses school districts' weighted average participation in similar or those types of premium categories. So family, employee only, employee plus spouse, employee plus children, or split contract. And split contract is when both spouses work for the same school district or in the state's case, work for the state of Wyoming. So it looks at each of those annual premium amounts, the weighted participation among school districts, and comes up with a weighted composite amount for health insurance for each model FTE generated through the funding model. Then that's allocated on FTE basis to each of the school districts as part of their foundation program amount. Outside of the block grant, school districts are reimbursed 100% for their costs related to transportation or special education. And then school districts pay for their federal funded employees or food service employees out of those separate federal or other funds categories. On page 2, table 1, I've outlined the past 4 years worth of health insurance calculations. This actually illustrates some stability in the state's health insurance premium rates, in that the premium rates at the state of Wyoming have not changed in the past 4 years. However, in the funding model, it has changed and has decreased primarily because school districts' participation in these categories have changed, and less employee participation in family plans has driven down the costs associated with the model amount. So when we take that high cost of the family plan and there's less participation in that and more participation in the employee only, there's less dollars being allocated to school districts through the block grant model. Figure 1 illustrates the historical per FTE amount in the model for each school year since the 2005 recalibration. And one note I would put on there is you'll see a little bit more of a dramatic decrease in school year 2000, I believe it's 2021-22. The state of Wyoming's premium amount shifted from the employer picking up 85% of the premium cost down to 82%. So nothing that the school district participation had in the plans, but rather the state of Wyoming picked up a smaller share of the employer premium beginning in calendar year 2021. One other big picture item here, school districts can also participate in the employee group insurance plan. One school district does, and that's here in Casper. Teton County School District number 1 does participate in the state's health insurance plan. And so that's offered for each of the school districts to do that, but only one has taken the state up on that offer. On page 3, I've illustrated the amount of funding that the block grant and transportation special education has provided school districts. You'll note the last 2 rows don't include the reimbursements for special education transportation. One school year 24-25 data is now being reported to the Department of Education, so it's not available in school year 25-26. That's happening right now, so we don't know what those expenditures will be. But figure 2 just illustrates that table in a graphical format. The transportation special ed in this instance takes up about 16 to 19% of the total health insurance expenditures in this analysis. So when we're talking about the total big picture of health insurance funding through the block grant or the reimbursements for health and for transportation or special education, that piece for the reimbursements ranges from about 16 to 19% depending on the year.
Mr. Wilmoth, the transportation, that's for bus drivers?
Mr. Chairman, good question. It depends on the district. But yes, they would be eligible. And I'll let the districts get into the specifics of each of their plans, but they set their participation requirements, or eligibility requirements as well. So under the state's plan, if you work 20 hours a week, you're eligible to participate and receive health insurance. A school district may be different. That threshold may be 30 hours a week. So a bus driver may not equate to 30 hours a week, but they may have multiple jobs from the district, which may make them eligible.
Yes. Senator Rothfuss.
I have a couple of questions. The first gets back to the way we calculate the value that we're seeing on the previous page. So this is the funding model health insurance amount per FTE. And you said that that was effectively a statewide weighted participation that determines that weighted participation across all school districts of the type of plan they're using. Is that accurate? And then employing the dollar values of what it would cost the state plan based on how they're structuring their contract. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, Center Office, my understanding is they report, so if they have similar plans to the state of Wyoming, they report their employee only and an employee only. If they have a family plan, they report their participants in a family plan, or they have spouses partaking in the same plan, they report that under the split contract. So they report as if they were to participate in the state plan. They may not have all 5 categories as the state plan, but they are to report as if their employees would be participating in the state plan.
Gotcha. But then it's a statewide aggregate. It's not on a district basis in any way then. We do it statewide and then deploy that to the districts.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. And that's a very nuanced analysis or observation. We do not apply the weighted participation on a district basis. We apply it on a statewide basis. So we aggregate that at the statewide level and then apply that to each district. So whatever it looks like within their district may be different on a statewide basis. So they may benefit if they have fewer family participants, or they may not benefit if they have a higher family weighted participation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's the first I understood that. So I appreciate seeing that we deploy that statewide. I didn't realize that wasn't more of a granular solution. And the next question, getting to the table 2, so our total health insurance, it looks like we're at the point now in recent years, and well, I guess it'll be hard to say what 24 and 25 is, but looking back at 23, 24, we were roughly maybe a little over 1/6 perhaps of the total budget was going to health insurance. Is that accurate? Maybe even a fifth? Nope, a sixth.
And Mr. Chairman, I know for about 25, 26, the total foundation program amount or total K-12 funding is about 1.79 billion. And if you presume another 55 million on top of the 214 million, I'm not going to try to do that math in my head right now, but that's kind of the
We'll go with about a
arithmetic
sixth. Yeah, okay. Sounds good. And I just think it's important to realize that, I mean, this probably is like our single greatest expense in education is paying for health insurance. And this is an important policy area, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I failed to point out, for this school year, it's $17,596 per FTE in the model, and then whatever is reimbursed under the special and transportation categories.
Mr. Wilmarth, these 5 categories add up to 100%, but I can imagine that there's some FTEs that do not opt into our health insurance because they have health insurance through their spouse or other means. How is that counted in there?
Mr. Chairman, I'll get into that in just a few pages.
All right, great.
So, Mr. Chairman, the next step in this analysis, and again, this analysis has been previously shared with this committee, Select Committee on School Finance Recalibration, the prior recalibrations. And so what we do then is compare what districts report to the Department of Education in their annual district report in terms of expenditures. And so this analysis goes back to the 2006-07 school year, and we can see that districts in total spend anywhere from 75 to 80% of, or actually early on, it was 95% of the health insurance amount. Most recently in school year 23-24, just under 76% of the health insurance amount allocated through the block grant was expended, leaving a difference of approximately $53 million. So they're utilizing those dollars elsewhere within their educational expenditures. So, Mr. Chairman, to your next question is, who's not participating in their health insurance plan? So Table 4 on page 5 illustrates all FTEs in the district and who is participating and who is not participating. And if you go to the last row, school year 24-25, 12,858 employees in the district participated in their health insurance plans. 3,771 employees did not participate in their plans. So anywhere from 75 to 79% of the employees over this time period have participated in the district's health insurance plan. So that could be due to the employee's spouse having an alternative plan that they're participating in, or it may be due to the fact, again, as I spoke to earlier, their eligibility requirements prohibit them from participating. So they may be under a certain threshold of hours where they aren't even eligible to partake in that plan. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'd point you to Table 5 on page 6. Since school year 2011-12, school districts have been required to report by position whether they are funded by state funds, meaning the school foundation program, or federal funds or other funds. And so what that does is allows analysis to be completed on funding model positions or state-funded positions compared to those allocated through the block grant model. And if you look in that major heading of K-12 funding model, approximately in school year 2024-25, approximately 71% of the model FTEs were taking health insurance in the district, and just under 30% of the positions, or 3,500 of the FTEs in the model, were not partaking in the district's health insurance plan. And you can see for state-funded special education and transportation positions, about 70% of those positions participate in the district's health insurance plan. And again, just over 30% do not participate. And again, that could be they're partaking in their spouse's health insurance plan, or they're ineligible under the participation or eligibility requirements of the plan.
Mr. Wilmarth, just from clarification for my benefit, we separate out the special education and transportation because that's paid from federal funds, or is there some other reason?
Mr. Chairman, the reason for that is the health insurance is 100% reimbursed in that instance. It's not funded through your block grant. The block grant generates or allocates FTEs based upon the number of students or the other formulas within your law. The special education transportation employees are paid for 100% outside of that block grant formula.
But that's a year in time lag in there for that reimbursement. Is that true?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
This conversation isn't new. We've had it the past several recalibrations. And so the last item within this issue brief just illustrates some policy considerations that have been discussed before this committee. One is within Dr. Pike's recommendation previously, and I believe it's going to continue in the 2025 final report, is you could make a minor modification to your formula to not allocate health insurance to summer school and extended day teachers within your formula. Some rationale for that in the past has been that those teachers that are employed in those positions are already participating in the district's health insurance plan, and so it's somewhat of a duplication of health insurance for those positions. You're not hiring a new summer school teacher. They're usually partaking in the health insurance plan already. You could account for the percentage of school district employees by district that are participating in the district's health insurance plan and apply that percentage to the health insurance amount within the model. That's a pretty dramatic change to the formula. As Senator Rothfuss pointed out, you could match each district's weighted participation to the health insurance amount. So the amount allocated wouldn't be on a statewide basis or weighted participation basis, but it would be based upon each of the districts' weighted participation basis. So if they do have more family participants in their health insurance plans, then that amount by district would shift. And then what has been previously discussed as well is to streamline health insurance, or maybe more of economies of scale, require all school districts to participate in the state's health insurance plan, not just your current one of Teton County School District number 1. So it's not a comprehensive list, but those are just items that have been discussed previously in recalibrations, and I just wanted to bring those to your attention. And then finally, if you want to look at your favorite school district, I've included 2 appendices which illustrate the expenditures for the block grant dollars and reimbursements in Appendix A, and then Appendix B includes by district the participation rates for their employees. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, happy to take any further questions.
Any questions? Representative Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The model requires that we allocate a certain amount of funding for, and part of the compensation is health benefits. And we look here about 75, 80% of full-time employees are taking part in that. When that money is allocated to a district for health insurance and employees, for whatever reason, refuse to take that benefit, what happens to those allocated funds?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Kelly, that would be a district decision on how they want to distribute or allocate those funds. There's no limitation on how those funds can be expended.
So just to be clear then, because of the block grant model that we have, they can get those funds for health insurance. If they're not used for health insurance, then they can use it on something else.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Kelly, yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, that brings up a point, and I emailed you all last night. I don't know if you had a chance to review it, but there was a question posed on what's the weighted compensation within the model. So as I indicated yesterday, for school year 25-26, the weighted average salary in the model is approximately $63,461. The model builds in 21.1% of non-health benefits. So this is Social Security, Medicare, retirement, unemployment, workers' comp. That 21.1% equates to $13,290. Then if you add in the $17,596 per model FTE, that gets you up to $94,447 per teacher. Then outside of the model, there is a portion of the employer share for retirement that's 100% reimbursed on the actual salary. I just took the weighted model average salary of $63,461, added another 2.25%, which equates to $1,428. You add that to that $94,447, the estimated weighted compensation for a teacher in Wyoming is $95,875, so just under $96,000.
Can you, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'll repeat those for you.
Yeah, please.
So the weighted average salary is $63,461. The health benefit is $17,596. The non-health benefits is $14,700 and I believe $18 for a total weighted compensation amount of $95,875.
Mr. Wilmarth, on the bottom of page 7, there's a footnote 5 concerning the retirees' benefits coverage. Could you explain that a little bit to me?
You bet, Mr. Chairman. The employee or the employer, any employer participating in the Wyoming group insurance plan is required to pay 0.6% for each employee on its wages for retirees. So for retirees. So this is one consideration or one comment that some school districts have indicated that why they don't participate in the state's health insurance plan is because this additional 0.6% on employee wages is not allocated through the funding model. Teton County School District, as I said, participates in the state plan. They're eating this retiree coverage cost. And so this 0.6% helps provide the employer contributions for retirees that are participating in the employee group insurance plan after they separate from the state. And so that subsidy isn't allocated through the funding model. So if you were to require school districts to participate in the plan, that would be a cost associated with each of the school districts and those employees participating in the plan.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Wilmarth. All right, now we'll hear from Wyoming Employees Group Insurance.
Mr. Chairman, they are online and ready to go.
All right, please let them in the room.
Good morning, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but it's not clear.
Okay.
Sounds like you're
Move a
underwater.
little closer to your
I
microphone.
apologize. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, now we
Yes.
can hear you.
I apologize. Hi, my name is Patricia Bach. I am the director for the Department of A&I. I'm here with Aaron Williams, who is the administrator for the Human Resource Division, which also includes EGI. Also with Karen Williams, no relation. That is the program manager for EGI. I think some of you might remember that we've had a change in program manager over the last couple years. Karen has been with us for, I believe, 22 years, almost 23. She took over about a year ago, and you'll probably hear mostly from her as the program manager. We also have Carissa Tolson here. She is the assistant program manager for EGI. We're here essentially to answer any questions that you have. I know this has been an ongoing discussion for a couple years. We appreciate the opportunity to be here to answer your questions. But we'll jump right into our what we call white paper for you, unless you have any, if you want to just forego going over that, if you have questions, but Karen will go through that quickly.
Please proceed. We have the white paper in front of us.
Great, thank you very much.
Hello, glad to be here today. This information is intended to give you an overview. I know that you should have received the opt-in manual as well, and that's what we provide school districts that inquire on potentially joining our plan and have interest. That's what we provide them. So this is just like a high-level synopsis. We are a self-funded program, which means we're community rated. Self-funded means that we bear the risk of the claims and have to make sure that we're fiscally sound to pay those claims. But the fact that we're community rated, whether you've got a group of 10 people or 2,700 people, the rates for premiums are the same for all members, depending upon what coverage level they elect. Currently, as of March 25, we have 21,900 employees and retirees that are eligible for insurance through our program. That's about 18,000 of that number are actually actively enrolled in the health or dental. That doesn't count lives of dependents and spouses, just the subscriber, the retiree, and the active employee. Our premiums are set by EGI. I make a recommendation each year on the premiums. Director Bach makes a recommendation to the governor's office, and then there's a final determination on what premiums will be for the coming year. You may hopefully be aware that Employees Group Insurance covers at least 13 different employer groups. That makes up the one school district. We've got the town of Hudson, city of Casper, city of Laramie. So we've got a good level of distribution of our membership across the state and more than just state and judicial employees. We have 10 staff members down at Group Insurance, and our plan year runs January to December. So as you might notice in that opt-in manual, we have groups that are on other plan years, July through June. Anybody that comes onto the state program converts to our plan year, which is just January through December. I want to make a note that we are required to do an RFP for all of our benefit vendors at a minimum of every 5 years. And of course, as you'd expect in RFP, a lot of what goes into those considerations is what network adequacy is, making sure what those reimbursement rates are, utilization management controls, as well as any kind of member disruption goes into the decision-making on who we have benefits through. So our core benefits, as you can see there, of course, we have health insurance with 4 different options. Our third-party administrator for that health insurance is currently Cigna. We will be doing an RFP next year for all of our core benefits. We have pharmacy through CVS Caremark currently. Delta Dental of Wyoming is our dental coverage. And we have a basic life insurance policy through the standard. The core benefits are what is taken into account as far as how the employer contribution is determined. But then we also have the added layer of the voluntary benefits, which are always 100% employee paid, to try to create a comprehensive benefit package. So we have a supplemental life insurance on top of the basic, and also through standard. We have vision through VSP currently. We do have a supplemental ambulance coverage for folks to enroll in, and that is through MASA. Of course, we have flexible spending, which is your medical reimbursement, daycare, and pre and post-tax insurance premiums. And then just to top it off with the cherry, we do have pet insurance. That's a discount through MetLife. Eligibility is one of the things that may be a decision maker here. As Mr. Wilmarth did mention, our plan does allow for benefit eligibility if you work at least 20 hours a week. So that's 80 hours a month, which of course is lower than the ACA, and many districts may be set at 30 hours. That means you might have some additional benefited employees that maybe currently aren't benefit eligible. We do have a part-time position type. And so if they work under 30, so they're considered part-time, but over the 20 per week, they get a half employer contribution. So that saves the budget a little bit while still allowing employees to be eligible for benefits. The retiree plan that we offer, they have to qualify with employees group insurance, which means if they've had coverage service for at least 4 years and are 50 years old, they can stay on our program regardless of whether they're pulling their pension, or if they just simply have 20 years of service, and that's through one of the employer groups that we cover. So if it's a district that they don't, that's not covered by EGI, those service credits don't count towards our program. Of course, we also offer coverage for COBRA for all dependents and employees who terminate the state plan. Some of the financial considerations you can see there is that employer contribution. As I mentioned a minute ago, how that rate recommendation goes through to determine rates for the coming year. Excess contribution is something else that helps fund employees group insurance, paying for medical claims and pharmacy claims and dental. So if you have an employee who decides that they don't want the health insurance, but they do want to take the dental, for example, they're going to get the smallest employer contribution that's available, and that would be the employee-only contribution. So as the example shows, if somebody currently, that's $900.19. If they're only electing the dental insurance, which today is $92.18 for family dental, and then I've thrown in there, they took the life insurance, say for $4.92. The dental and life insurance will get paid, but the $803.09 that's in excess of their elected benefits still comes to employees group insurance. Those dollars are used to pay claims. And as again, Mr. Wilmarth mentioned, the retiree subsidy payment, that is that 0.6%, and that funds future retirees who get a subsidy credit off of their retiree health insurance, nothing else. If they don't take a retiree health insurance, they don't receive the subsidy. But that is for future retiree credits. Another thing here, equitable contribution. So right now, if somebody works at one of the school districts that's not on the state plan, and their spouse works for, say, a state agency, they could have double coverage. If the districts were to come on, any district that were to come onto our program even today, if somebody works at Natrona County School District and their spouse works at the Department of Corrections, they can't have double coverage. It's the same program. So we have what's called a split arrangement, and that's intended to make sure it's equitable between both employer groups that say that the Natrona County School District's not on the hook for an entire family contribution. Instead, they pay half the contribution and Department of Corrections would pay the other half. So we have what's called split arrangement. The other one, you see there, letter B, is what we call two singles. Same deal. If somebody works at Natrona County and somebody works at Department of Health and there's no kids to cover, therefore there's no, it's not air quote family coverage, they would both be required to have employee only on the district an employee only on Department of Health. And again, that's to make it equitable so that one employer group is not stuck with the entire contribution. Lastly here, I just had some impacts to what would happen for employees group insurance if this was mandated that all districts came onto the program. Our budget authority and spending would be significantly affected. We would have to double our employees group insurance staff. And there's a lot of logistics there to figure out how to onboard 48 school districts. Everything's simple if you know how to do it, but there's a lot of training involved in expanding our staff in order to handle an additional 12,000 potential new employees and their dependents and the retirees that come along with that. So yeah, our claims would go up, our spending authority, our overall budget would increase significantly. So I hope that's helpful. It kind of caps off what's in that opt-in manual, but I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Yes, we have some questions. We'll start with Co-Chair Salazar.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for that information. One of the options was that all districts came on board. I understand the requirements that you would need with additional personnel, but I want to put that aside for the moment. Tell me, if all districts did come on board, how that would affect the state system as a whole. Would it strengthen the system? Walk me through the second and third effects if all districts did come on board.
Yes, Mr. Co-Chair, the impact directly would be an influx of claims utilization. When the Teton County School District came on the state's plan in 2010, about 18 months to 2 years later, there was a rate increase because we have so many more participants on the program and of course have higher claims utilization. However, when you add that large of a pool to a program, the pool simply gets better. So what we want to do is make sure we don't have it. It would help what could potentially be construed as adverse selection. So the more families you have on the program, the more healthy people you have on the program, that directly impacts what that utilization is. And there's always the theory that like 20% of the population uses 80% of the benefit. So hopefully I'm not using a lot of services, but the employee who may have been, diagnosed with cancer is using a large portion of the benefit. So from a fiscal position, it would be a lot more money into this program, but it would simply make the pool bigger and it would have an impact. But once we get over that blip of an impact, having that many more people added to the program, it would level itself off. So it would give us a bigger pool if that helps.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So your testimony is that after the initial bump, it would be a wash.
Mr. Co-Chair, I don't know about a wash, but it would re-levelize itself. So we would be maybe operating at a higher level than we are today, but we just, it would level off after that initial spike, I guess.
So with the bigger pool, would your policy or program be stronger because you have a bigger pool than what you have today? Would there be a chance your policy would actually, premiums may actually go down because of the bigger pool?
Mr. Chairman, I do believe that to a large extent. This is the kind of information that if we were to do that, I would probably want to check with our consultants to be able to give you a more solid understanding of whether there's actually cost savings. There might be cost savings to the budget in general because of perhaps a levelized method of providing employer contributions, because the school districts would be in with these 13 additional employer groups. So the state may save money. Whether our premiums actually go down because of it, I don't know that I can speak to that right now, but I could certainly try to get you some information on that.
Okay. Senator Rothfuss, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, exploring that a little bit further, typically the larger, healthier pool you create, the more stable that pool is going to be and the more predictable it's going to be, and that leads to better rates. So when you suggest that it will levelize at a higher rate, I guess that's counterintuitive to me. I don't understand why with a larger, healthier pool, you wouldn't end up seeing stabilization of rates and the rates potentially going down, if anything. So I guess I'm not understanding the logic behind why we would have an expectation that we would see a higher levelized rate. Could you explain that a little more?
Sure, Senator Rothfuss. More people is more claims equals more expense. So there may not be, I don't predict that the rates would go down. If anything, they would levelize after initial spike because now we spend more money. We have more people in the program. It's never a good idea to expect premiums to go down, if that's fair.
Follow up. Yes.
But on a, claims are going to go up, but what matters obviously is on a per capita basis. So again, expanding a pool, this is typically all of how health insurance works. You have a small pool, you have horrible rates. You expand the pool, your rates get better, and optimally, you have a very large pool and your rates can stabilize, you're de-risking the situation. The risk is what leads to the high rates, and we would have a circumstance where even though the number of claims have gone up, the revenue supporting those claims has risen, but it doesn't necessarily have to go up together. So again, it's just counterintuitive to me to expect anything to go up. And I do understand what you're saying about claims going down. That's the market itself, that healthcare costs are going up. So I mean, all else equal. So we're not expecting healthcare costs to go up. I would expect the rates due to a large pool to be lower than the rates in a small pool. I mean, isn't that typically accurate analysis with pooling of health insurance?
Senator Rothfuss, it could be. It depends on the pool of members we're talking about. Healthcare costs are going up, and they go up for us now. Adding more dependents, more lives to the program still equals more claims. It's not something that's going to suddenly make employees group insurance rates go down 10% because we have another 9,000 people on the program. The general rule of 20% of the population uses 80% of the benefit still applies. We'll have more leverage if the school districts were on. We have a lot of, like I said, disbursement of membership throughout the whole state to begin with. But as far as the contracting for providers, potentially negotiating some better rates because we have even more lives on the plan is something that could be a consideration into it. There's a lot of variables in there, and to presume that adding 9,000 lives would make our rates go down, I think is not something that I can commit to being what would happen. So,
all right. Follow up, Senator.
What about on the side of the yield that goes to our providers? So in this instance, right now, the provider is Cigna. You're negotiating every 5 years through an RFP. It seems that from the perspective of that negotiation, a larger pool, a pool twice the size, is of substantially greater value to that entity. Mm-hmm. And therefore, it would give you better negotiating leverage for whatever portion of each transaction ends up going to them, which, I saw the contract a few years ago, but I don't remember exactly how it works. Would that not be a better position for the state to be in with a larger pool available to negotiate with a provider?
Senator Rothfuss, yes, it would definitely give us additional leverage than what we currently have today, even with our expansive membership across the state already. But that in itself could save some costs for sure. Again, that's another one of the many variables that would be in the pro column rather than any potential con column. So yeah, that could save the plan money for sure.
Any other comments? Any other questions? Thank you very much. I see no other questions from the committee.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we are at noon and we have two more presentations. Mr. Wilmarth, what do you think the timing is for completing this? We got to decide whether to power through or break for lunch.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we communicated with both entities about a half an hour for their total presentation, which would include Q&A. And I don't know how much testimony you
Public
may
comments,
receive
yeah.
on this from public comment. I would anticipate either an hour to an hour and a half. And then if you have any committee directives after that.
Okay, so let's see from the committee's perspective, what's your pleasure? Do we take a break?
1 hour lunch.
Okay, we're going to break for lunch until 1 o'clock.